I mean, seriously, are you ready? All right, let's do this. All right, everybody, let's give a warm welcome to David Kalt.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right.
So I've got nice waters here
That's
for
very,
you.
very interesting.
A little unnerving, I know.
We have a lot of rock stars in this store, and I don't think that's ever happened.
Awesome. So, David, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the past few weeks, and I know some of the folks here know how I like to start out. And really, I mean, this is all about you. And so I think an interesting place to start is tell us a little bit about where you grew up, where you're from, what were you doing when you were a kid, and maybe when you might have had that little entrepreneurial spark.
Okay. I'm from Detroit, suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, we got a lot of Detroiters around here. We like to hire kids from Detroit, so that's all good, and Kalamazoo. And there's something about Detroit. You know, you've got obviously Motown, you've got the music scene, you've got Jack White, you've got Eminem. There's just this grindy sort of
Thanks for that.
You know, attitude about Detroit. You just grow up with it. You don't realize it until you leave there. It's just a place that just gets the shit beat out of them every day. People are just really edgy, and even in the suburbs. I mean, I grew up in a middle class suburb, Farmington Hills. It was a relatively nice area, but it's just Detroit. And those of you who read about Detroit, it's got attitude with it. So I kind of grew up with that, and then from an entrepreneurial perspective, I really two things. One is growing up in a family business is a great experience. I believe my family owned a travel agency that my grandmother had started in the 50s. And dinner table conversations were about the things I think about now. And I bring my business home to my kids right now because I really think those are lifelong lessons. I mean, I heard, cash flow problems. I heard about, rent embezzlement, employee issues. I mean, those are the things that my mom and dad talked about at dinner, better or worse. That is ingrained in me. And then my first real job outside of working and helping the family business was that I really started to do the entrepreneurial math was a caddy, golf clubs. And you start even thinking there, it's like, well, what's really involved in golf? Well, you realize you could carry 2 bags for 2 people, and you could literally double, you could scale yourself and double your rate if you could double bag it. But I was a scrawny little skinny kid. I could barely carry 2 bags, but there was a whole art in terms of how to get a double bagger, and then I could do 18 holes or 36 holes. So I started thinking very early on in 7th grade about caddying and ways to make money, and I parlayed that into valet parking. And I always thought of myself, I always loved working. I always grew up in a family where I felt guilty if I wasn't working or doing something productive, whether it was valet parking or caddying, and then ultimately working helping my family out in their business. I gravitated toward the computer side and really getting into learning their computers and helping with their computers at an early age.
So when did you actually start playing around with computers? How old were you?
I remember an IBM PC, an Epson PC in 12 or 13, but I never really started programming until I was in my 20s. I didn't write any code. This is the 80s. I think I took a basic class in high school. I think they had basic, but I never really started coding until my 20s, after college.
So where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to college?
University of Michigan.
What did you do after school? I mean, did you start tinkering with things while you were in school? Did you think about building anything, or?
When I went to Ann Arbor, I was really very anti-establishment, very anti-business, anti-law, anti-everything. I was reading Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. I really felt my purpose in college was to get as far away from establishment as possible. My parents did not know what to do with me. I mean, in retrospect, I feel the luxury that I could actually go to a state university and have the freedom to explore liberal arts education and explore communism and socialism and believe in that to become the most ultimate capitalist ever. And when people are just like, think they're capitalists, I'm like, no, you have to go all the way to the other side and really understand why capitalism and why free markets are so great to appreciate it. So I feel like I did that. I really went to that extreme.
Was there kind of an awakening out of that? And I don't mean that in sort of
It was a
negative
rebellious
way.
stage. It was pure rebellion.
And then, so when did you kind of give up the Marxist,
Well, I was a poli-sci major, so I had some good professors that inspired that sort of, analytical thinking and challenging the status quo, which led me to music and Bob Dylan and Tom Petty and real edgy musicians. And that inspiration led me to say, I'm going to get this degree, but I want to do something in music. So I spent all my spare time in the recording studio on campus. I moved to LA for a summer, and I worked in a recording studio and parked cars at the Playboy Mansion in the evening. That valet job came in handy. So I worked at a recording studio, and then when I graduated college, I moved to Chicago, and I got my first job at Chicago Tracks Recording, and I wanted to be a recording engineer. I wanted to produce, and I did that for a year, and it was awesome and hell at the same time. I was working really, really hard, 80, 90 hours a week, around the clock studio. There's heroin, there's house music, there's rappers, there's
Is this like early 90s? What are we talking about?
It was crazy. I mean, I wasn't like doing the heroin, but it was all around, and I was not into it. I said, I do not want to be doing this when I'm 30. I realized that a career of a musician, a professional musician, a gigging musician is great for some. It just wasn't for me. I was in love. My wife-to-be, I met her in college, and I knew I wanted to shack up with her. So I had to figure it out. Ironically, in the studio, we had lots of computers. We had lots of digital technology. This is 1990. Things were just starting to get digital. And I kind of fell in love with computers through music, left the studio world. I mean, you talk about a pivot. I mean, I just like dashed out of there. I went to Northwestern. I started taking a computer class. I taught myself C++. I got into DePaul in a master's program at night. And then I started to lean on my experience in my family's business in the travel industry and worked my way into travel and technology through various jobs in Chicago, and then I started my first company 3 years later.
And that's where, tell us more about that. So did you approach your family, your parents, and say, hey, I've got this solution that I think can help you? Or what was kind of the impetus for building this thing?
So I took some jobs in Chicago, one at a big travel company called Arrington Travel, and I started to just learn. I mean, I'm a very curious, disruptive guy. So give me a job and I will peek around the corner and dive into other areas. And I started to see the software that they were building, and it gave me ideas. And then I would go home to Michigan and visit my family's travel agency, and I saw some needs that they had. So I started developing some software while I was working, sort of like in the evenings. And eventually I had enough of a kernel idea. Back then, you'd put it on a floppy drive. I had enough of an idea that I pitched it to a company down in Texas that represented 300 travel agencies, and he said, I'll buy 50 copies, and he wrote me a check for 20 grand.
This was a working program that you had? And on the spot?
On the spot,
incredible.
one guy.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if it's incredible, but it's just, back then, Bill Gates was my inspiration. Like getting a line of code, getting your program to fit on a floppy was the challenge. I mean, breaking the code down to the smallest possible components so that you could demo it. So I had to get it to work on these travel agencies' PCs that had very little memory and very little processor. So my challenge was to make my software lean enough to fit onto these, because I couldn't go sell them new hardware. This is what they had. So that was my challenge, is creating good software in a lean environment. And oh my God, I'm like going crazy just thinking about having what I had to do to make that work. But this guy saw what I was doing. He bought a bunch of copies and got me in business, because then I had to go sell it. And then I had to figure out, I wasn't just going to sell to his 300 agencies. I was like American Express, Carlson Travel. I then said I leveraged that relationship to then build it to the point where I was a real threat to this accounting software that dominated the industry. And he was trying to do a similar software to mine. It was a CRM system. We didn't use the word CRM back then, but it was a contact management system. It sucked up information from the airline reservation system and allowed you to build a database on where you went and who you were, what your demographics were, if family, young, whatever, and then we could market ideas to you, travel ideas. Makes sense? Back then, there was nothing like it. It's called client base. And then this guy really saw me as a threat, and he offered to buy my company. I was like 27 years old. It was a lot of money at the time, and I was ready to move on. I was like, I saw Expedia coming and Travelocity, and I was like, these guys are going to destroy my customers, and I'm out of here.
Yeah, so
like that.
is that like mid-90s now we're talking about?
This is 97, 98.
So did you have a team at that point?
At around 30
Oh, you did?
employees. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So backing up just a little bit, getting to 30 people, I mean, was there, when you sold that first customer, did you have like a CTO, or were you the acting CTO?
No, me. QuickBooks, me code, me sales, me phone, me everything, yeah. Hire one guy, you know, borrow money to do, well, I had that 20 grand from the guy, so then I hired one guy. He didn't work out. And then I found someone back then on you know, we didn't have Twitter and Facebook, on AOL. So I had an AOL account, and this guy Lou, I've been working with him for 30 years actually. But I found Lou on AOL, and he became my marketing partner. And then I hired a programmer, and we worked away. Yeah.
That's a great story. So that was sort of like it transitions from pre-web to web. So you're seeing all these things happening. You get out of it. Now what do you start thinking about?
So here's the interesting part of my story, which gets really, really bizarre, is in the early 90s, with that AOL account, my father he ran the travel agency, but he taught me, he kind of would always talk about the markets, and so I was always curious about the financial markets. So I taught myself how to trade options when I was like 22 years old, but there wasn't options brokerages and stuff. I would like go to the Charles Schwab office and, you know, and sit on that little computer they had in the corner and like place an option trade with, you know, very little money, and I'd learn about it, and I wasn't very good at it. But it's like gambling. I mean, options trading is gambling. I don't care what they say, it's gambling. And Mike, where's Mike?
You can play your bet.
Okay. So I started trading in my 20s, and every time I would, you know, do well, I would, you know, build up my brokerage account and trade a little bit more. So when I sold Client Base, I knew I wanted to get into trading and finance. I got such a rush out of it that I really wanted to explore that. And I was also very frustrated. I was trading at Charles Schwab. I just sold my business. I had a lot of money. I was trading at Charles Schwab, and they sucked at options. It was really bad, and I was like, how could this be? Why couldn't it be better? And meanwhile, I lost basically all the money that I made selling my business, like $1.5 million. I lost it in like 6 months.
Whoa.
Done. Had to tell my wife that. She'd know. It's right. I was like broke again. $1.5 million in like 6 months. So then I'm like, well, I've learned something. I suck at trading. I'm going to go build a brokerage. That's basically the epiphany. I mean, I really was not a great trader, but I still was not giving up on it. But I felt part of the reason I wasn't a good trader is I felt the tools weren't adequate, and I was I was naive, and I thought I had some sort of competitive advantage when I didn't. The floors were still very dominant, and the trading from a screen was not the same as it is today. So I decided that I still loved options. I wanted to do something in brokerage, and I started to network like you're all doing tonight, and I met my future partners, and we shared this common vision for building an online brokerage called OptionsXpress, which was just an offshoot of what I was doing the prior 3 or 4 years. And we built, and Reverb's just the same thing. I'll get to that, but it's the same thing, just different vertical. So from all the trading and losses and bad experiences I had we really built a really kick-ass online brokerage. At the time, this is 2000, we won the Barron's, which is kind of like the US News and World Report for colleges of brokerage. We won Best Online Broker, not just Best Options Broker, 5 years in a row. And it was just my ideas with great programmers, great marketing people, great brokerage. And I'll get into this now, but I'm really proud of that experience. What I'm most proud is that we built a great business. I don't really love the startup world, the word startup, because it doesn't imply business. And I'm really big on building businesses. And there is a startup at one point, but then it turns into something else. It's got to become a business. It has to provide value to people that are willing to pay something, and then you are able to profit from that, or at least provide employment. Raising money to me isn't an accomplishment. I'm sorry. Take it however you want. Raising money is a part of the process if you have a great idea that you think is going to add value to people's lives. Then it's a business. So we raised $2 million, and we built a $1.5 billion company 4 years later, and not on smoke and mirrors. I mean, the company was making, when we went public, was making $50 million a year, and I was competing with Ameritrade, Schwab, E-Trade, multi-billion-dollar companies with tens of thousands of employees and all sorts of stuff. And what I'm most proud of is that sort of David and Goliath attitude of taking on these big entities that are very inflexible, and they can't really connect with customers and understand how to build dynamic, flexible products. That excites me. That's like the challenge to me, is when you see an eBay, which is what we look at today in our space, and we see why they're struggling, even though they're still huge and lots of people use them every day, we see the flaws in that, and we want to build on that and create something better. And that's what we did at OptionsXpress, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a great ride, and I could talk all night about it.
I got to know Mike a little bit, and it was kind of a surprise that he actually worked at OptionsXpress, and we were talking about culture a little bit. And it's interesting to me, and I've done this a few times, and there are a lot of folks that, whether they intentionally do it or not, there's some sort of culture that they create, and then it sort of fuels itself. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, was there an intentional, or was this just David's sort of spirit?
I use the term a lot. There's like a method to my madness, but I think you have to be, somewhat crazy to be entrepreneurial and really, really out there taking risk, because you're not just risking capital, you're risking personality. And the people that work for me know it, and there's a lot of people here that work for me, is I don't really care if you like me. I just want you to respect what we're doing and have pride in what you're doing. And you're not going to like me every day, because I'm going to be an asshole. Because I'm being an asshole usually for good reason, because I believe in the customer and I believe in what we're doing. And that's the whole culture starts around that. And the people that work here, they know that. And then I don't have to micromanage what Chrissy does or Jan does or Joel does, because they get it. They get it that David's, he's a jerk, he's being a jerk, but he's right most of the time. Because I'm not right because it's my way or the highway. I want to be challenged. But I want everybody on the bus to know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. So we sit in meetings and transparency is like my middle name. Like, well, and most people don't want to hear about a P&L, and they don't want to hear about a balance sheet, and they don't want to hear about a bad Yelp review. But that's what I thrive on. Like, if we can't address those issues, and we're going to be not confront the reality of what makes a good business, we're not going to progress. So that's kind of the core of the culture, and openness, total openness, willing to be challenged, encouraging everyone to sort of voice their opinion and evolve and take those ideas and be extremely iterative. I think I have a fair amount of ADD, so I move from idea to idea. So it's hard to work for a guy like me who's on to the next idea, and I need to surround myself with people that are good at process and can execute, and then move ideas forward while all these new iterations are coming up. So part of culture is knowing yourself well enough to surround yourself with people that complement you, not necessarily people that stroke you, and I've learned that as well.
I think that's a good bit of advice. Were there any key folks early on, I mean, with that kind of, I guess sort of, your intentions and your command of your business, was there anybody early on with OptionsXpress that complimented you in any way, that you hired, that you felt like was a really important hire? And if so, why?
Well, I had two partners, two really dynamic partners. I had a guy who 20 years my senior, Ned, and he taught me the brokerage business. He made me get my Series 7 and all my brokerage licenses, and I was bringing the sort of technology, CEO, leadership role. So he was a huge influence on me in helping me. He'd forced me to confront, my own limitations in terms of my fears or delegation. I'm a doer. I like to lead by example, but you can't be a doer and scale and grow your company. You have to be able to let go of things and trust other people. He had a big influence on trusting me in that regard. But I feel like, I talk to people sometimes that think they're building technology companies, and then they talk about their first hire, and it's their COO or it's their sales guy, and I'm like, well, my first hire has always been a technologist. So at OptionsXpress, Vlad, and I hated paying recruiters, but I paid a recruiter for Vlad, and he was the kernel of the team, and he was able to build around him and help us recruit and hire for that. So you always, if you're building scalable technology, I'm not a big believer in like outsourcing. I mean, I outsourced Reverb for like 6 months until I met Jan, and then we were ready, and then I knew we could build something. I didn't have a business until I actually had a team, and that's kind of how I look at those first hires.
So when did you leave? Well, tell us about OptionsXpress. You went public and all of that. Tell us about that experience. And then eventually leaving, and I'm curious why.
So, similar small idea, raised a little bit of money, hired some people, launched a product within 3 months. Love that energy, that startup, building a product, interacting with customers, getting all those awards, starting to make money, extremely profitable, growing really quick, adding employees, now 50 employees by 2002, 100 employees on everyone's radar screen, private equity firms wanting to invest, so now we're at 2004, still having fun, still growing, maybe 150, 200 employees. We did a round of private equity with Summit Partners. We sold them a third of the company for like $100 million. That $100 million went to all of our shareholders. We didn't need the money. We were making a lot of money. So it was a very profitable company. And that was our liquidity event. That was like the first time I actually had money that I could say, okay, like money changes things, right? Like, okay, I could buy a bigger house. Still drove the same car. I had a parking lot. But what did I buy? One of my partners bought a Rolls Royce. Ned bought a Rolls Royce. Jim bought a fucking Ferrari. He lives like a mile from me. I can't stand him. He drives by all the time. And I came to Chicago Music Exchange and bought a 1964 Stratocaster for $7,000,
Well,
and
that's
that
just
was
way cooler.
splurging. That was splurging. And that guitar is worth around $18,000 today. That was 2004. So that was a good investment. And I had I was not like, oh, one day I'm going to buy this store and do that. I didn't that wasn't
It's
part of the
interesting
plan.
though. I mean, so that's 2004. You haven't left OptionsXpress
Right, I'm
yet,
still-
right?
Yeah, we didn't go
so
public yet.
did that experience plant any seed at all for the future, or is that just coincidental, or?
I think that's how to have a little bit of extra money to do something, what's the word? Chrissy, what's the word? Extravagant.
Yes.
To do something extravagant, something I wouldn't, normally do. I just to spend $7,000 on a guitar I wasn't brought up to do that.
Yeah.
So that felt good. That was sort of I felt I earned it, and then it was a whirlwind from there. Then once we took on that money, so $10 million in my bank account, 64 Strat, I'm feeling great. I felt more pressure the next day. Like, that's why I said about raising money doesn't mean much to me. I felt way more pressure. Summit Partners was counting on me to take this company public from a $300 million valuation to $1 billion, 2, 3, 4, whatever the number was. I felt way more pressure now that I had put my ass on the line. I was not going to let them down. And that's when the light bulb went off that I'm not doing this for the money. Like, I really realized it at that point that the money was not the end game. The building the company was really the joy of what I was doing. It was that thrill. And then I spent that next year taking the company public, and Summit made more money in that investment than they made in like one of 3 investments. And it was one of their best investments, and they sold it 18 months later. And they sold it, their $100 million, they generated like $300 or $400 million on it. And people would ask me all the time, is like, why did you take that money? Like, you were a year away from going public. Couldn't you have seen, like, why'd you sell them a third of the company? I'm like, I have no regrets. At the time, it made a lot of sense. They took risk off the table. They enabled me to take greater risk because I really felt that I had reached a pinnacle in my career that enabled us to take greater risk and run the company. So then it's 2005. Now I'm running a public company, and now the people who buy shares in your stock really could give a shit about what I had done for the last 5 years. They could care less. All they cared about was the next quarter, where you're taking the company. And that's when I realized I'm good at a start-up. Sorry. But taking that company to that next level was a new challenge. I was starting to feel beyond my core. And while I felt if I wanted to be a CEO, like that kind of a CEO, I felt like I could do it, but I was feeling very uncomfortable in myself. I would sit in meetings with analysts that were really smart, all Harvard MBAs and Stanford MBAs, and they felt like they knew my business better than me. And I'm like, if you know there's so much, why don't you take $2 million and build $1 billion company? Like, I just did that. That's what I'm good at. So, what do you want to talk about? We could take this to a $3 billion company. Like, I didn't think like the formula needed to change. Like, I felt like I had a little bit of magic, that I knew what I was doing, but I felt like I was surrounded by people that thought they knew how to do what I do better than I did, and it got very frustrating.
Was there anybody along the way when you raised the $100 million and so on and went public? Was there anyone internal or external that you confided in? Like anybody that you kind of leaned on?
I joined YPO. A friend told me to join that, and there was like a forum. That was okay. I mean, so there was a little bit of those conversations. I was having problems with one of my partners. I mean, that was the crux of probably one of the main reasons I left, is we were just not getting along. And I was, once again, I was like, life is too short. I'm not loving what I'm doing. I'm not necessarily the guy to take this company. My partner, like, he just wanted to sell the company, and it was just a matter of timing. And then the financial crisis started to hit. So in 2007, I was like, I told the board, I was like, guys, I'm done. And what did they do? One of my board members sent me a brochure, an American Express brochure, to go to rock and roll fantasy camp, because they knew I was a guitarist and I loved it. So I went to a rock and roll fantasy camp with Roger Daltrey and Cheap Trick, who now I'm good friends with Cheap Trick, Rick Nielsen. And I went to rock and roll fantasy camp, and it was great. And I had a weekend getaway, and I came back, and I was like, I still am ready to resign in 6 months. Can we plan for this? Can we, like, our CFO is really competent guy, David Fisher. He's running Enova now, and he ended up being my replacement CEO, and he sold the company to Schwab, and he's really good at what he does. He helped us go public, and David's very sharp. So I felt very good in sort of leaving David with the company. But my other partner, we were just struggling, so we weren't having fun anymore, and I just felt like if I wasn't totally happy, and even though, you know, this belief is that, well, you've done this, you started this company, I was, you know, the main personality of the company, that it was my responsibility, but I had more of a responsibility to my wife and my kids, and I wasn't happy. And I knew it, and I knew that I needed to reinvent myself. And it's part of just, you know, when I sold my first software company, Client Base, I knew I was done. I was done with travel. I was done, like finished. And a lot of people, that scares a lot of people. I love that. I loved it when I bought this store, and people in the industry were like laughing, oh, here comes another rich guy into the industry. And I love that, like reinvent myself. I know I won't be doing this in 10 years. I mean, the staff will either own this store, Reverb will go public or do something big, but David Kalt doesn't have to be so tied to what he's building, because I want to build something bigger than me. I want to build something that resonates with customers and connects with people, that is bigger than any one personality. The guy I bought the store from was the personality of this store. And I said, this is bigger than him. He probably didn't want to hear that. But the reality is I think I've proven that he had a great idea and he had a great vision for building an awesome guitar store. And now I'm just, you know, taking it to another level.
So you literally, when did you buy this place? What year was it?
I bought this, so I left OptionsXpress in 2007.
Right.
I spent another couple of years trading, losing money. That didn't learn my lesson there. And then,
but this time though, you didn't lose it all, though, right?
No, I did not lose it all.
Yeah.
I was smarter, but I realized I was done. I mean, I was ready to leave finance. It took a couple of years. It's like finance has this effect on you where it's just not real. I mean, there's the ability to make money on money it's just disproportionate to other ways of making a living. Just leave it at that. So it's hard for people to leave that because they see the power of it. And but I was ready to leave it, and then I was like, ironically, like when I left the recording studio, I'm like, I want to do something. I want to get back here. I know I could build something. I wasn't going to get in the recording studio business. I know that was a poor business. I wanted to build a successful business, but I knew there was opportunity in e-commerce. I knew I could be good at e-commerce, but I didn't know anything about really running a retail store.
So did you look at this as a platform to get into e-commerce, or brick and mortar, I just want to turn this thing around, or?
I bought the domain reverb.com, and I said, I'm going to start a music store online. That was my idea. I called up Fender and Gibson, and they all laughed, and they said, you need to have a showroom. And then I realized, okay, if I need to buy something, I'm not going to buy the corner music store. I'm going to buy what I consider to be the coolest music store in the world. So I approached the owner. And it's not every day someone that comes along that can write the kind of check. What I was really buying here was I was buying a collection. This is like the biggest vintage, collection in one room. And it wasn't really a great business. It was a great store and a great destination. It was more like a museum. And I knew then, so I realized it was a means to an end. I needed a store. I needed to get a Fender dealership and a Gibson dealership and a Martin dealership. So I approached him. I bought the store, paid a lot of money for it, and then I started to learn, and most of my staff's here. I mean, they started to learn the vintage side of the business, understanding guitars. We opened up an amazing drum shop. It's all about the people. I mean, it's all about just meeting and finding the right people. And then this store, I realized I forgot about Reverb.com. I totally said, I'm not doing that. I'm doing Chicago Music Exchange. This is a store. People come from all over the world. Johnny Depp came within my first 6 months, walked in the store. The Heartbreakers were here, Tom Petty, Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day. I was like, shit, this is awesome. But it wasn't making money at all. It was upside down. It was $8 million of inventory, or maybe at the time, $7 million of inventory, doing $3.5 million in sales. Wow. With a great staff that we just, it had a guy who was really good at flipping guitars to Johnny Depp, which isn't me. I mean, I can shake his hand and make small talk, but I'm not good at flipping guitars to rock stars. So I realized what I needed to do is I needed to rearrange the store and say, well, if people want to come in and play all this rare stuff, I want to make sure they leave with something affordable that they could buy at Guitar Center or at other stores. I wanted all good stuff here, but at all price points. The store was lacking affordability. And I believe that you can have quality and affordable. So everything that we have in this store is quality. We don't sell any crap. But there's something at every level of where you are in your musical career or in your financial career and your ability to afford. So we really worked a lot of making sure that we had enough inventory at all price points. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And now this year we'll do 20 million in the store. And a lot of that is online, but a lot of that is the store, and we've got the staff really we've got a CRM system. They build relationships. It's a real relationships. It's a destination. People come from all over the world, but when they leave here, they want to buy from us. We shoot amazing videos. We develop content. We have an e-commerce strategy. We do sell on eBay and Amazon. And so so the store's evolving, and then what I had to do was I had to sell some of that top row of inventory to make room for all the new inventory, all the new Fenders and Gibsons and Rickenbackers and Taylors. And that took, because I couldn't put any more money into it. My wife was like, you're done. This is not a hobby. This is, it really wasn't my wife. My wife could care less. It was really me. I mean, I was not buying this to fail. I was buying this to build a successful business. I really believed that this was the core of it. But I didn't know anything about marketplaces or what I was about to embark on in Reverb. I really didn't. I mean, that happened. And I guess my biggest lesson from that is go do it, like figure out where it is you want to go do something, live it. Like I lived in the repair shop. I lived in shipping and receiving. Like I learn it, I lead it, and that's how Reverb came to be. Reverb is the evolution of Chicago Music Exchange. So the short story is, I'm trading guitars. Daniel, we take the photographs, I put them on eBay, and it was like trading options at Charles Schwab. It was the exact same experience. I'm like, eBay has not progressed. It's legacy. It's difficult, and it was expensive. It was 10%. And I'm like, and I heard other dealers complaining about FeeBay and all this stuff, and then it's just like, well, that's my next OptionsXpress. And that's when the Reverb light bulb went off. Is like everyone's very frustrated with this big eBay, and there's millions and millions of people buying and selling instruments on Craigslist and eBay. I can build a better place for that. So I got really excited then. Then I was like, because this business, Chicago Music Exchange, is great, and I love it, but it can only get so big. Right. You have to build warehouses, and you have to hire lots and lots of people. And like with OptionsXpress, when you get lots and lots of people, I don't do as well. So I like scalable businesses where there's technology as the core of what you're doing, and you can scale around building good technology to grow a business without having to add lots and lots of people. So I'm really, so we launched Reverb in January of 2013. That's only like 19 months ago or 20 months ago, with this idea that buyers and sellers could come together and they could list their inventory. It really competes with Chicago Music Exchange in a lot of ways. And we were going to do it at 3.5%. It was really inspired by Etsy, which is now like a $2 billion marketplace for handmade goods and scarves and hats and cool things. And we were inspired by Etsy, and we said we were going to build a really great user experience. We were going to focus on content and curation and organizing all these instruments in fun, engaging ways. And we started hiring, and we built a great team, and it's growing at like 15 to 20% a month. We'll do 150 million probably next year. We're running at around $75 to $80 million run rate in terms of sales on the platform. It's becoming the industry, the leader, and people are just flocking into it. And it's not any one big, it's not like Guitar Center doesn't sell on it, but thousands of little micro entrepreneurs that are buying and selling instruments in their basement are on there, and dealers like Chicago Music Exchange. And it's I got this experience from the financial world where liquidity, the more participants you have, the more liquid your market is, the more it attracts more people. So it's like a snowball right now, and it's just gathering up momentum. It's very, very exciting. And you can tell I'm in my element because I have this great store with great people and great instruments, and then I have this technology firm that's just taking off with an amazing staff, and we just have tons of opportunity ahead of us. So I'm kind of in my element right now.
Are you gonna keep it just to instruments, musical stuff? Or, I mean, obviously this could, I look at like Craigslist and eBay, it's almost like they're making it easier for you in a way, because the experience is so bad.
Yeah.
And all that stuff's out there.
You know, I feel the opportunity is really large to stay true to the musician. I feel we're going to find ways. Right now, we're just the tip of the iceberg in terms of selling gear, and you know, we have DJ equipment, and we're having pro audio and PA systems and microphones and all these other categories. But what I really want to do is I want to figure out, once people have a great experience buying and selling on Reverb, I want to figure out how to help them in their musical career. So I want to help with instruction. We want to help bandmates find future bandmates, or even if you're dads and you want to find a drummer to play with. Finding ways to sort of leverage the brand, and Reverb being this thing about bringing music and gear into people's lives. And if we do that, I mean, we're talking billions of dollars of companies. So I don't feel limited in music.
Yeah, so really like you're going way beyond just instruments.
Yeah, but not into watches and cars.
Unless they play music. Right.
Exactly.
Well, that's very cool. So why don't we open it up for questions?
Yeah, I'm very involved, and I do like to be involved in the product selection, like you said. Like the guys, the people on the team, they know they make decisions independently of me, but they get me involved in the decisions because I have an opinion. And I'm the CEO who's shooting off emails at 2 a.m. about an idea or a bug. I mean, I find bugs every day, and I keep these guys on their toes, and I'm using the platform. That's the part I didn't really talk about. OptionsXpress. I was a trader, not a floor trader, not a professional trader, a bad trader. And I built a product that I thought could make me do what I did better. Reverb, honestly, I was selling on eBay, accepting offers, making offers, buying and selling on eBay. When we launched Reverb, what we did is we loaded it up with all of CME's inventory, and now I was basically running the Chicago Music Exchange part of Reverb. So I am now the user for Reverb. So the amount of feedback generated from me to the development team is massive. And that's what evolved the program. So now surround me with a good designer and good developers and all these ideas and all this feedback, and that's how you have a great product. And I've done that 3 times now. I think that's probably the most relevant formula is that I use it. And these guys tell me that all the time. I'm like, duh, well, who would build a product that they didn't use, right? But that's not so obvious. There's a lot of people in ivory towers building really expensive products that they have no real connection with why someone would use this and how they're going to use it. And that's not something, I don't believe that's something you can effectively study in a focus group. Like our focus group is real time. So good question. That's really, we're really into it, yeah. It was really is a retail product. So it's retail investors. It's not professional traders. We had 300,000 or 400,000 accounts. It's a brokerage account like a 401k or an IRA, like you would have with Charles Schwab or E-Trade. So it was an account. You'd go, you'd deposit money into it, and then you could place trades. So in order to place trades, we had to give you tools to find good trades or analytic tools to do more complex trades like a spread where you're buying one option and selling another, or a covered call. So we just built on what other brokerage firms had done. We were just doing it better, more advanced, and we spent a lot of time on education. So we were teaching people like I taught myself how to trade options, but I wanted to teach other people how to understand the options market. The options market is amazing. It's like chess and poker and math and Rubik's Cube all in one. I mean, it's fascinating. And I was really excited and passionate about it. People think that when I went here, like now you're doing your passion. I'm like, honestly, I was really passionate about options trading. And I love options trading. I think it's a really, really interesting way to hedge and manage a portfolio, and manage your money in a very risk-averse way.
I mean, isn't it, I know you mentioned this, but isn't what you're doing now just extremely analogous to what you were doing before?
Yeah, we're trading instruments. We're moving instruments. Reverb is flipping instruments. So let me tell you sort of, the Reverb it's a great user experience. It's based on what Chicago Music Exchange does in terms of buying and selling. But one of the things that we did is similar to the options market is I saw that the market was extremely inefficient. So for instance, if you were to come and bring in a guitar to the store today, 3 years ago, I would try and buy that guitar for you hypothetically for $1,000. And I was told that I should mark it up 100% and put it on a hook and ask $1,800 to $2,000. And I did that for the first year. And I sat and I came in every day and I looked at that guitar. And one dealer told me, it's like, the great part of this business is, even if you don't sell that guitar, at least you better buy stuff you like looking at. And that was, right, Daniel? Was Daniel here? No? That was his rationale of why it's okay to buy inventory. Well, I realized once we launched Reverb with 3.5% commission instead of 10%, that I could buy that same guitar for $1,200 and then ask $1,500 for it and sell it in 3 days instead of 6 months. And that's when the light bulb really went off about liquidity and really being able to create a more efficient market. So now we are buying guitars for $1,200, flipping it to another dealer for $1,500. He's maybe selling it to a customer for $1,600 or $1,700. And then it ends up back on Reverb 3 months later after he's done playing it for $1,400. But he's got $300 of value for something because he's basically rented the instrument, and then it's sold again. In the past, that guitar was sitting in someone's closet being unplayed for a year. So that's a lot of what Reverb's doing, is we're creating liquidity where it doesn't exist.
And aren't there are a lot of local stores using your platform?
Oh yeah,
right, to buy
thousands,
and sell? Yeah.
thousands.
So I mean, in essence, you've created this whole kind of ecosystem around instruments.
Exactly. It's an exchange of sorts, yeah. We did have a little bit of an unfair advantage because there's probably around 1,000 used instruments in the store that instantly became on the platform. So rather than us having to go out and convince, let's say, 20 dealers to put all their inventory on here, the mere fact that we had all these instruments on there attracted other dealers Now, Reverb competes with Chicago Music Exchange. Chicago Music Exchange has its own website. Chicago Music Exchange sells on eBay and Amazon and in the store. And the store does, you know, $70,000 a day or $60,000 a day in sales. Reverb, CME only sells around $5,000 a day on Reverb. So it's a small part of the business. But when we launched, Reverb was 40% of the daily sales. I'm sorry, Chicago Music Exchange was 40% of Reverb. Does that make sense? So Chicago Music Exchange really seeded the platform, enabling us to be able to buy. And then what I did in addition to that is I said, I really want Reverb to be successful, so I'm gonna maybe buy instruments that I might not be able to make a lot of money on, but I'm gonna delight sellers by making sure that their stuff gets sold really quickly. So if you put up your guitar and in the first year, and maybe it was worth, to me, maybe it was worth $1,200 in my store, and let's say you were asking $1,300, you know, I might offer you $1,100. And by the time I photograph it, repair it, and put it in my store, I've already lost money. But I know that you would be a total like reverber for life if you sold your guitar really quickly and you got maybe more than the market could bear. Now that's an example of where I think using raised money or, you know, venture money or startup money is actually good, because what we did with that is we had capital to spend. Chicago Music Exchange wasn't going to lose money. Reverb was basically subsidizing liquidity to grow the platform, and I think that's a legitimate way to grow your business.
Do you have separate teams?
Oh, separate company, completely separate teams, different outside investors.
Does the paid search person on one compete with the paid search person
Yes.
on the?
She's smiling. Yes, definitely.
Really?
And
That's
we paid, it's not the smartest strategy, but I do have outside investors for Reverb, and Chicago Music Exchange has no advantage on the Reverb platform at all. You know, I'm not that worried about eBay, and I'm not that worried about Amazon, because they're really good at what they do, and they're trying to do a lot of things, and we're trying to really stay focused on what we do. So Reverb, I don't really feel, the other thing I haven't told you about myself is one of my other cultural and philosophical things is I read an Andy Grove book in the 90s, Only the Paranoid Survive. So I definitely have this like ingrained paranoia. So I don't really think about a competitor, but I do think about not having a competitive advantage and forcing myself to create competitive advantage when it doesn't exist. So I'm not like waiting for someone to compete. The paranoia is just there every day, and I instill that in the staff to be paranoid, that we can't take what we have for granted. So I think that's kind of more how I approach it, and then, so I don't look for competitors. I think I want to be confident enough to feel that we're building a better product, a better experience, that competition is not as relevant. Paranoia drives me. So I had really good success at OptionsXpress. Most of our investors were not professional institutional investors. They were friends and family. They all made a lot of money, like 150 times their money in 4 years. My family's travel agency became worthless in 2005. My father invested $50,000, and that was what enabled him to retire. So those are, a lot of my Reverb investors are people that made money in OptionsXpress. And I went back to them, and I have a philosophy on this, as you can imagine. I have Summit partners, some of the individuals invested in Reverb, but I've only taken small investments from like 30 or 40 investors, because I really believe working for Excel or Sequoia is not that exciting. They're just managing money for someone else's fun. And how exciting is that? Now, making a friend or an uncle or a cousin or someone else working for their $50,000 and turning that into $500,000 or $1 million, that's exciting to me. That's inspiring to me. So I've always felt like, what's so exciting about making money for Sequoia? They have plenty of money, and they're just taking their 2 and 20 on that money. So this round, I just raised $5 million. I had to turn down a lot of money, and I had to turn down institutional money. And people think I'm crazy, I'm stupid. Like, why don't you take that institutional money? I'm like, it doesn't motivate me. It's unmotivating. So, I mean, the ideas, in my case, the ideas are focused around the business. So I'm not like, I'm an awful passive investor. I invested in homemade pizza company.
Ouch.
Ouch. Too much money into that. I invested in a guy who had a great business idea. It was a little too early, and I blew a lot of money on that. So I've decided I'm an active investor only. I'm only gonna put my capital to work in ways where I think I can actually have real influence and really involved. Not because I'm so into myself and so great. I do have enough of an opinion that for me to invest $20,000 or $2 million, my opinion doesn't change. So when you invest $20,000 in a business and no one really cares what you have to say, it's really frustrating. And that was part of why I would then go invest more and more and throw good money after bad money in bad investments. So when it comes to how I act, I really like to be able to act on the ideas. That forces me to keep my ideas really focused. So the ideas, all the ideas are energy. All the energy is around Reverb and Chicago Music Exchange. Like, those are all the ideas. There's no, let's go start a solar company. I mean, that doesn't exist. I bought the building across the street. It was a real estate project. And I started meeting with architects and contractors. And I was getting headaches. And I was like, Reverb, we were launching Reverb. And I was like, I can't deal with this, and permits, and it takes months, and I deal in hours. And I sold the building, and I am now renting from them. And people say, why are you renting? You own that building. It's across the street. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to have 8,000 square feet. There'll probably be an Urban Outfitters. Probably will be I could have made a lot of money on that building. And I am so happy that they are dealing with that headache, because I suck at that. And I'm building Reverb, and I'm it was a great decision. So I guess to answer your question is, all these ideas, you have to know what you're good at. And you have to know what you can execute on. In terms of software ideas, I think my team right now challenged me to be able, I think the modern software guys, Jan and all the guys we have on the team, they really challenged me to focus on usage and what's working, and don't create a lot of extra code that we don't need. So we built auctions with Reverb because eBay had them. And I'm like, we have to have auctions. Auctions are time sensitive. It creates a sense of urgency and brings people to bid on things that they wouldn't naturally. So we bid auctions. It took 2 months. And auctions never really took off. And it never took off, not because the software wasn't good. It didn't take off because we didn't have enough critical mass. People weren't willing to do dollar reserve auctions, and they were basically putting unrealistic prices in there. People were canceling their auctions, and all the things that we just weren't ready for. And then one day Jan came in and said, David, auctions are 1% of our revenue. It's been a year. What are we doing this for? And I'm like, all right, let's kill it. So we killed auctions, and our business continues to grow. We relaunched auctions as just an event, scheduled events. We do them once a month. We call up 20 or 30 dealers. They put inventory on there, and we do these no reserve auctions, and they're starting to become fairly successful. But we were challenged that we thought we needed something. In my old business at OptionsXpress, I would build new features all the time so I could win those awards, so that people came to OptionsXpress because they thought we had all these great tools. But the reality is they didn't use them, but we gave them the perception. So in that business, I had to keep generating cool ideas to keep having a fresh site. In the retail world, we're constantly having to come up with new videos, new ideas, new merchandising strategies, buying new inventory, and coming up with ways to create an engaging experience here. I kind of answered your question.
That's awesome. I think we'll end it right there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for
Beautiful.
coming. I mean, I get you all in my store. It's great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's give it up for David.